And now, Deep Thoughts with Troy Baker by Jack Handy. Silent Hill. A lot of memories in this town, especially of Uncle Caveman. We called him that because he lived in a cave, and every now and then he'd eat one of us. Later we found out he was a bear.
For nearly 20 years, Silent Hill 2 has been heralded as one of the best horror games of all time. But it's also become yet another example of a game that's difficult to play through official means, or at least difficult to play in a decent form. The most modern release is the poster child for bad ports, 2012's HD Collection. Developed by an outside studio using incomplete code after Konami lost the final build, the port has rampant technical issues and is generally considered the worst version to play. The original art director even expressed embarrassment that people might think the HD Collection reflected his work. The problems ranged from a severe loss of fog uncovering the sudden boundaries of maps to audio stutters and frame rate issues, and of course, Comic Sans. Subsequent patches reduced but did not fix the issues, and with Konami having fucked off to make slot machines, I think, it's not clear if there will ever be a better release. Over the past few years, a group of fans have done what Konami don't by creating a worthy remaster of the PC version of the game, dubbing it the Enhanced Edition. While the PC port wasn't as downgraded as the HD Collection, it also suffered from weak fog and missing effects. It also barely runs these days without mods, with broken audio, frozen cutscenes, and low resolution limits. The Enhanced Edition does the essential work to get the game running smoothly while restoring or exceeding the quality of effects from the original PS2 game. The new fog alone transforms the look of the game and has several separate fixes for density and speed. The original noise filter looks horrible, but the game is too sterile and clear without it. The new filter is modeled after the PS2 effect, and the adjustable resolution makes it much better suited to HD and 4K. The lighting, shadows, and flashlight have also seen a variety of enhancements, which is very important considering the amount of time spent in dark rooms. To be fair, there are still a few glitches with the lighting, but barely anything worth mentioning. The game now supports widescreen and has all the appropriate fixes for clipping and camera glitches. All of the audio has been upgraded using the better quality PS2 files. And the FMVs have also been upscaled and replaced, although the improvement there is pretty scant. While there's no full texture pack, there are replacements for specific images with seams and other issues. The list of changes goes on so long that it's easier to just say that the game is fixed and better than any other version. So how well does this version of the game hold up? I think I'm in a unique position to test that since... confession time. I've never really played it. I started it years ago, but the technical hurdles always stopped me from getting past the half-hour mark. So if you care to hear them, what were my thoughts taking this newly enhanced journey for the first time? First off, holy fuck, the camera sucks. A lot of people say that classic Resident Evil has bad controls, which I'll always disagree with because they work for what they do. You can learn tank controls and get predictable results out of them. This, on the other hand, feels like the camera is your main antagonist the entire time. The angles often don't display what's ahead, and if you try to force a different view, the camera may not respond or wildly swing around without delivering a useful result. The Enhanced Edition did subtly improve camera movement, but it's still bad, and I have to think that those who can't stand classic Resident Evil must have a hell of a time playing this. And unlike Resident Evil, where the fixed cameras were consistently put to good use, there were relatively few moments where the angles seemed to have much purpose. The views chosen also tend to obscure important areas and items rather than emphasize them. Aside from losing some cool shots, I wouldn't mind a modern over-the-shoulder camera in this case. This was a recurring thought as I played Silent Hill 2. There's a lot of overlap with Resident Evil in terms of the basic combat and puzzle solving, but, and this shouldn't be controversial to say, the game doesn't do Resident Evil as well as Resident Evil does. In spite of releasing within 1 year of remake, Silent Hill 2's combat and animations feel so much stiffer and dramatically more dated. I honestly can't say that any of the fights are interesting, unless purely for story reasons. A few of the puzzles are also frustrating. The game can be very picky about where you're facing, and even if you investigate a point of interest, you may pass over an important item because you were off by a millimeter. I had to circle back a few times to discover that there actually was a pickup there, which is a problem Resident Evil avoided by making key items sparkle. To put it bluntly, everything about the way the game controls is clunky and archaic, and while that may sound damning, it didn't actually diminish the experience much. As long as you explore enough, the survival horror isn't very strict and there's not much pressure to conserve health or ammo, so the worst the camera angles can lead to is a minor hit or two. The heart of Silent Hill 2 hasn't aged at all, and that is its overbearing atmosphere. The heavy fog and rotting interiors are still creepy as hell, and if anything, age has worked to their advantage. As anyone who's done HD textures will probably tell you, it can be hard to avoid a cleaner look when doing high-res versions of old objects. That blotchiness just makes the world look that much filthier. Everything in Silent Hill is dark, squalid, and desolate, along with the literal fog as an emotional one, like a suffocating shroud of hopelessness draped over you from the very start. The world seems designed to disorient you. There's not too much direction, and progress is usually made by reaching around in the dark and exhausting every option. The beginning feels like a drunken stumble through surprisingly open city streets, and it wouldn't quite hit you the same if the path were linear and efficient. Getting lost and confused is as much a part of the game design as it is the story. It isn't scary because there's a creepy mannequin in a dark hallway. It's what's under the surface that's disturbing. Rather than its enemies, it's the way the game weaponizes depression against you that serves as the source of its horror. The team was very thoughtful in designing characters that would harbor different types of pain, down to their mannerisms and clothing. The things that are scary in the game are things that are scary in real life. Disease, loss, guilt, and all forms of abuse. And the developers were not fucking around with how dark they were willing to take these things. The full story has to be pieced together, often through scattered newspaper clippings or by interpreting the nightmarish imagery, which seems like the only tasteful way to handle such uncomfortable material. It's not the most gory or shocking game I've played, but it is probably the most disturbing and haunting due to the way it uses its characters. Basing the horror off of very real psychological problems is probably the biggest point of divergence with Resident Evil, and the fear hits at a much deeper level because of it. It might sound like a miserable slog, but it can be cathartic, especially for those experiencing depression or grief.
I bet a funny thing about driving a car off a cliff is, in midair, you'd still hit those brakes. Hey, better try the emergency brake.
The soundtrack is another great strength, perfectly capturing a kind of druggy, detached nostalgia, almost as if the music is playing underwater. It's another reminder of the emotion modern games are losing by reducing their scores further and further into background ambience. Akira Yamaoka not only composed the music but also handled the sound effects, and the game often switches between emphasizing one or the other room by room. The uncertainty over whether what you're hearing is actually there or not remains unnerving to the very end. There are also different endings to shoot for without any clear binary switch between them. Playing a certain way makes you more likely to get one over the other, but doesn't guarantee it. It's an interesting approach that makes you think about how you play the entire time rather than just doing one specific thing at one specific place. Over the past 2 decades, I've seen every horror game with surreal qualities get compared to Silent Hill 2, but having finally played it, I don't think anything has matched it. The Evil Within 2 is one of the most recent ones, and it didn't impress me nearly this much. Yes, the hallway you just went through is different when you turn around. Boo! Silent Hill 2 does things like this, but later in the game when you're deeper into the abyss and reality has more reason to fall apart. I've seen echoes of its mechanics in the successors I've played, but Silent Hill 2 still wields them the best. It's clearly not a game for everybody. On the surface, its controls are dated in a way that a fan mod can't fix. It's not very fun to play and certainly doesn't work as an action game. But as a deep plunge into the darkness of the human mind, the experience still holds a lot of power. Some amazing work went into making the Enhanced Edition the definitive version, and I'm glad I waited for the mod to mature before playing. There's not much more to say without spoiling the story, and in this case you definitely want to go in with at least a little mystery left. And those of you who have already played the game will know all of this already. The only thing left to say is that it may be difficult to legitimately find the Windows version now that prices seem to have skyrocketed. But if you paid for the HD collection, I think you're entitled to get a copy by any means necessary.
Meow. Meow. Wow.